Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The name Potter has long been a symbol of heroism, sacrifice, and love. But what if we've been looking at James and Lily from the wrong angle all along? What if the images shaped by memories and legends don't match the reality? It's time to take off the rose-colored glasses. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Too much praise. James and Lily were adored by those who knew them. But here's the paradox: readers and viewers barely know them. Voldemort took their lives at the very beginning of the story, leaving behind only scattered fragments, memories, dreams, hints. That was enough for many to fall in love with the idea of them, but not the people themselves. Their actual presence in the canon is minimal, their personalities barely sketched. The rest? Speculation and fan fiction. Number 2. Lily. Too perfect, too beautiful, too kind, too smart, too ideal. Lily is practically a saint. And sainthood, as we know, doesn't make for a realistic character. She commands respect, but not empathy. Where are her flaws, her doubts, her moments of weakness? Harry believed in the legend of his mother, but to us, Lily remains a marble statue, cold and lifeless. Number 3. Were they really talented? Slughorn once called Lily a genius at potions, but are we overvaluing that opinion? The same Slughorn was easily charmed by Harry, so why not by Lily? As for James, he supposedly helped create the Marauders map and became an animagus. But Peter Pettigrew did too, and the map was made by 4 people. So where exactly is their exceptional brilliance? It's hard to spot. Number 4. Lily wasn't a perfect friend. Snape called Lily his only true friend. But how did she support him? When James humiliated Snape in front of everyone, Lily didn't stop him. And when Snape, out of desperation, used one awful word, she turned away from him forever. He begged for forgiveness. She gave him silence. Did one mistake erase everything they shared? Or had Lily already moved on, having found someone more glamorous? Number 5. James didn't atone, he just grew up. Yes, he changed. Yes, he became a father, a protector, a fighter. But did he ever atone for his past? Harry believed his father matured and became better, yet there's not a single scene in the canon where James admits his mistakes or shows remorse for how he behaved at school. No apologies, no attempt to heal the wounds he caused. He simply aged, married, and that's it. Number 6. Their love feels unconvincing. Lily spent years despising James. She rejected him, called him arrogant and cruel. So what changed? The books never tell us. What made her change her mind? Are we sure the love between them was genuine and not just a convenient turn of events for the plot? Maybe Lily wasn't as principled as people think she was. Number 7. Was she really that popular? Strange, isn't it? A girl described as the life of the party ends up with no close friends. James had his crew, Sirius, Remus, Peter. But Lily? Aside from Snape, not a single person appears who was clearly close to her. Where were those who stood by her? Where are the memories of her, the people who mourned her deeply? Why is it only James and Harry who seem to truly remember her? Number 8. James was a bad father. James Potter died a hero. That's the story everyone tells. He stood between Voldemort and his infant son, wandless, unarmed, shouting for Lily to run. It was brave, it was tragic, but it also froze James in time, as a legend, not a man. We never saw the father he would have become. And given what we know of him, there's reason to wonder if he was truly ready for that role. James lived for thrills. In the Order of the Phoenix, Sirius tells Harry, he was the best at everything, but he was young and he had to grow out of a lot of things. That growth supposedly happened off the page. But what if it didn't? What if fatherhood was just another challenge he thought he could master without effort? He had always chased glory, from Quidditch to duels. Would he have chased peace, responsibility? Or would he have grown restless, leaving Lily to carry the emotional weight of the family? Harry's memories of his parents are borrowed, stories told by others. There are no bedtime tales, no first steps, no quiet moments, just flashes of panic, fear, and final sacrifice. Maybe James loved his son. But love isn't enough, not without presence, not without patience. And for someone who spent most of his youth showing off, it's fair to ask, would James have learned to slow down and be a father? Or would he have remained a hero to the world and a stranger to his own child? Number 9. Lily could have prevented the tragedy. Severus Snape begged Voldemort to spare Lily Potter, not James, not Harry, just her. In the Deathly Hallows, Dumbledore asks him, "You disgust me. Do you care nothing for the lives she put at risk?" And Snape answers, "Only Lily." That obsession, twisted as it was, might have saved her, but it didn't, because by then Lily had cut him out of her life completely. She never gave him a second chance, never asked what he was becoming or why. She saw the darkness and walked away. What if she hadn't? What if, when he tried to apologize, she had truly listened? Snape wasn't just another Slytherin. He was her oldest friend. He knew things the Order didn't. He moved in Voldemort's circle long before Dumbledore trusted him. If Lily had left the door open, even just a crack, he might have warned her sooner, might have acted before the prophecy reached the Dark Lord's ears, but she shut him out for good. It's easy to say she had every right. Snape called her mudblood. He chose dark magic. But people change, and Snape did, because of her. If she had seen the man behind the mistake, the tragedy might never have happened. Her silence helped seal her fate, not out of malice, but pride. And in that pride, she lost the one person who would have done anything to keep her alive. Number 10. James was a coward during school years. James Potter walked the halls of Hogwarts like a king, confident, loud, always surrounded by Sirius, Remus, and Peter. But confidence isn't the same as courage. In the Order of the Phoenix, Harry watches a memory in the pensive. James is 15, lounging by the lake, laughing as he hexes Severus Snape. Sirius joins in. Remus looks away. And Peter claps like a fanboy. It's not a duel, it's a public humiliation. 1 against 4. And James calls it just messing around. That's not bravery. That's performance. James wanted to be admired. He wanted cheers, laughter, attention, and he got it by choosing easy targets. Severus was isolated, unpopular, and James knew exactly when to strike. Real courage would have been standing up to his friends, not attacking someone who couldn't fight back. But James never did that, because deep down he feared losing the spotlight. Even Lily saw it. She stormed up to James in that same memory and said, "You think you're funny, but you're just an arrogant, bullying toe-rag, Potter." She didn't see a hero. She saw a show-off. James craved approval like oxygen. Every prank, every duel, every smirk, it was a mask. He wore it well. But behind it was a boy terrified of being ordinary. It's easy to call James brave because he died protecting his family. But bravery isn't just one act, it's a pattern. A life lived with integrity. And in school, James didn't show that. He showed fear. The fear of being ignored. The fear of being alone. And he drowned it in cruelty, disguised as charm. Number 11, their marriage was rushed. James and Lily were only 21 when they died. That means they married, joined a war, and had a child, all within a few short years. It sounds romantic. A whirlwind love story against the backdrop of darkness. But maybe it wasn't fate. Maybe it was fear. In The Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore tells Harry, "You are protected, in short, by your ability to love." the only protection that can possibly work against the lure of power like Voldemort's. That kind of love sounds noble. But what if James and Lily mistook urgency for love? They went from school rivals to lovers in what seemed like a flash. One moment Lily couldn't stand James, the next she was Mrs. Potter. The books never show us how that happened. There's no real story of their courtship, no slow development, just the outcome, a wedding, a baby, a war. It's easy to fill in the blanks with fantasy, but war twists time. It makes people rush, makes them cling to whatever light they can find. Remus Lupin, Sirius Black, even Dumbledore, all of them knew how short life could be. They saw friends die. They knew the world was collapsing. James and Lily weren't exceptions. They were caught in the same storm. But unlike the others, they had a child, and that changes everything. Harry wasn't born into peace. He was born into hiding, into fear, into prophecy. Did they really have time to fall in love the right way? Or were they two brave kids trying to hold on to something before it slipped away? Their marriage is painted as perfect, but maybe it was just fast. Maybe they never had the chance to grow together before everything shattered. Maybe their love was real, but unfinished, rushed by death knocking at the door. Number 12. Lily made a selfish choice with Peter. The decision that doomed the Potters is often blamed on Sirius Black. But what if it was Lily who insisted on choosing Peter Pettigrew as their secret keeper? It wasn't just a casual choice, it was a matter of life and death. And Lily was not a bystander in that decision. She was a mother, a fighter, and a member of the Order. She knew what was at stake, yet somehow she placed the safety of her son in the hands of the weakest link. Peter wasn't close to Lily. He was James's friend, a tag-along, never the leader. Even Sirius saw through him. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius says, "Peter always was a weak, talentless thing. He was always the least of us." If Sirius knew it, why didn't Lily? Or worse, what if she did and chose him anyway, out of desperation, out of convenience? Maybe she didn't want to burden Sirius or Remus. Maybe she thought using Peter was clever, hiding behind the least likely suspect. But cleverness without caution can become cruelty. The truth is, Lily had the intuition. She was the one who saw through people. She stood up to James when he bullied Snape. She defended the innocent. But not this time. This time, she misjudged character and underestimated evil. That one error made in trust or pride led Voldemort straight to her child. In trying to be strategic, she played with fire, and the fire consumed her family. Lily's image is often painted in soft colors, gentle, wise, flawless. But no one is perfect. Her mistake wasn't just tragic, it was selfish. She didn't demand better, she didn't ask more questions. She gambled with her life, James's and Harry's, and she lost. That decision, silent and brief, may be the darkest mark on her legacy. Number 13, Lily looked down on her own family. Lily Evans was always described as kind-hearted and compassionate. But when it came to her own sister, Petunia Dursley, the warmth faded. In The Philosopher's Stone, Petunia speaks of her sister with a mix of hatred and heartbreak. My sister being what she was, my parents were proud, but I was the only one who saw her for what she really was. There's pain in those words. Beneath the bitterness, there's a deep sense of rejection. Lily didn't just become a witch, she left her Muggle family behind and never looked back. The Evans sisters were close as children. They picked flowers together, shared secrets. But once Lily received her Hogwarts letter, something changed. She never truly tried to bridge the gap. Even when Petunia called her a freak, it was a cry for attention more than malice, a plea to not be left behind. But Lily didn't reach out. She found a new world, a new identity, and cut the old one loose. It was easier that way, clean, magical, special. And in doing so, she let her sister drown in jealousy. Snape noticed the tension early on. In the Deathly Hallows, when young Lily talks about magic in front of Petunia, he says, "She's just jealous, she's ordinary, and you're special." But even then, Lily didn't correct him. She didn't defend her sister. She liked hearing that she was special. And maybe she started to believe it, that she was above the ordinary, above Petunia. Number 14. James risked his friends for fun. James Potter always wanted to stand out. That much is clear. But when he and his friends, Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and Remus Lupin decided to become animagi, it wasn't just an act of loyalty. It was thrill-seeking, risky, dangerous. Becoming an unregistered animagus is illegal for a reason. The spell work is complex. The risks are high. One mistake and a wizard could become permanently trapped in their animal form, or worse. The transformation was meant to support Remus, who suffered alone during every full moon. But was that the whole reason? James and Sirius were known troublemakers, rule breakers. They thrived on excitement. In Order of the Phoenix, Sirius proudly says, "We were young, thought we could handle anything." That line speaks volumes. It wasn't just about friendship. It was about proving themselves, about pushing limits, about control. James didn't just want to help Remus. He wanted to show he could master forbidden magic. But the consequences came later. Peter Pettigrew, the weakest of the group, managed the transformation, but barely. The same Peter who would betray James and Lily, who would cower before Voldemort. Perhaps if James had thought more carefully, he might have realized that dragging Peter into such dark magic was reckless. Pettigrew wasn't brave, he wasn't ready, but James pulled him in anyway, and years later, Peter's cowardice would cost them everything. And what about Sirius? Turning into a dog was easy for him. But that taste of danger, of living just outside the rules, never left. It festered. It led him to make the terrible mistake of switching secret keepers without telling Dumbledore. A gamble, just like before. Sirius trusted too much in the bonds of boyhood. Number 15, they could have joined the dark side. What if James and Lily Potter had fought for Lord Voldemort? It sounds absurd, almost offensive, to utter such a thing in the corridors of Hogwarts. The golden couple, the brave ones, the parents who defied the Dark Lord 3 times and died protecting their son. And yet, if we strip away the veil of sentiment, if we look past the legend and examine them not as martyrs, but as people, young, flawed, and impressionable, this uncomfortable possibility begins to take form like mist rising in the forbidden forest. James Potter, even as a teenager, was never a stranger to arrogance. Sirius Black, his closest friend, said it plainly. He was an arrogant little Burke. You know, the sort of bloke who'd hex you just for fun. These aren't words from an enemy, but from his brother in all but blood. James's confidence bordered on cruelty. He once hung Severus Snape upside down in front of a crowd for nothing more than amusement. A hero? Yes, but also a boy drunk on power. In a different house, under a different mentor, might that same thirst have led him toward the dark arts? The Sorting Hat famously hesitated before placing him in Gryffindor. It's not hard to imagine it considering Slytherin for James. He had the cunning, the ambition, the confidence. He had a sense of superiority that aligned more with pure-blood supremacists than with the humility of true heroes. Had he fallen in with a different crowd, had Lucius Malfoy or even Evan Rosier extended a hand at the right moment, could James have accepted? And then there's Lily Evans. Often painted as the moral compass of her time, Lily's portrait in our memories is one of compassion, intelligence, and strength. She stood up for the underdog. She called James out on his arrogance, and she severed her lifelong friendship with Severus Snape over the word mudblood. But what if Severus had never called her that? What if, instead of being repelled by Slytherin ideology, Lily had been embraced by it? What if the house of ambition and legacy had claimed her? Slughorn adored her. He saw in Lily what many others did, brilliance, charisma, charm, but Slughorn was also known for grooming power, collecting students like rare potion ingredients. He spoke fondly of Tom Riddle. What if Lily had been pulled into the same orbit? She was a Muggle-born, yes, but Voldemort's followers didn't always discriminate as rigidly as they claimed. Regulus Black was just 16 when he joined. Barty Crouch Jr. came from a family of staunch blood traitors. Conviction doesn't always follow logic. And consider the tale of Bellatrix Black. Once a promising student, described by some professors as intensely gifted, she was slowly consumed by Voldemort's ideology. Her descent was not instant. It began with whispers, admiration, fascination. That same path could have opened for Lily, especially if circumstances had been different. What if her sister Petunia had been kinder? What if Lily had grown up desperate to prove herself not only as a witch, but as someone worthy of respect in a world that viewed her as lesser? We must not forget that many Death Eaters were school-aged when Voldemort rose. Mulciber, Avery, the Carrows, all of them once walked the same halls, shared the same lessons. The difference between hero and villain is often one of timing. Who meets you at the crossroads? Who speaks into your ear when you are angry, alone, or disillusioned? Let us imagine this alternate path. Suppose that in 6th year, James Potter, still chasing admiration and dominance, feels disillusioned by Dumbledore's leniency. Suppose he grows tired of being reprimanded for acts that others laugh at. Suppose he finds solace in someone like Rabastan Lestrange, who tells him, "Why serve under a headmaster who shackles your magic? Voldemort rewards strength." James might laugh at first, but perhaps the idea lingers. Meanwhile, Lily has drifted from her friends. Mary MacDonald and Marlene McKinnon have been distant. Her sister has rejected her. Snape, who once confided in her, now flinches whenever she's near. Then comes the invitation. A letter, unsigned, but written with the elegance of someone who knows her mind. "You are more than their labels, Lily. Power doesn't need a bloodline." She's too curious to ignore it. It could have happened. In that volatile time, it wouldn't have taken much. Perhaps a failed mission from the Order, perhaps a tragedy at Hogwarts, a student killed by Death Eaters, and the Ministry responds by arresting innocents. Bitterness can become a seed, and in the chaos of a world unraveling, even the brightest stars can fall. One cannot dismiss the magnetic force of Voldemort himself. Before he was feared, he was admired, charismatic, clever, a visionary in his own right. Even Dumbledore admitted to being unsettled by his charm. Voldemort didn't demand loyalty all at once. He cultivated it like a gardener cultivates a rare flower. First, he made you believe that the world had wronged you. Then he offered you a place to rewrite it. Think of Regulus Black. He joined Voldemort to gain power, then died trying to undo the mistake. Think of Narcissa Malfoy, who never bore the dark mark but danced dangerously close to the edge. The Potters were not far from this circle. Sirius Black, James's best friend, was the one exception in a family of fanatics. James could have made the opposite choice. And if he had walked beside Sirius's brother instead, what would have happened to Harry? In this dark mirror of history, Harry Potter might have been raised among Death Eaters, a half-blood prince of the New Order, trained not to resist Voldemort, but to inherit him. Instead of the boy who lived, he'd be the boy who conquers. Perhaps Draco Malfoy would be his rival for power, not morality. Perhaps Hermione Granger would be his enemy, a Muggle-born rebel, hunted by her childhood friend. Number 16, James never respected Lily's wishes. There's a moment in the Harry Potter series where we're told that James Potter and Lily Evans were meant to be. Their son, Harry, is raised on the idea that his parents died out of love, united in purpose, devoted to each other until the very end. But beneath this romantic legacy lies a troubling truth, one we glimpse only if we look carefully. James Potter, charming and brave though he may have been, never truly respected the desires of Lily Evans. From his behavior at Hogwarts to their eventual relationship, there's reason to question whether James ever really listened to what Lily wanted, or if he simply pursued her until she gave up, resisting. We first meet James Potter not through his own actions, but through memories of others. Sirius Black describes him to Harry as the best friend anyone could have, and Remus Lupin assures us that James matured over time. But the young James, the one we see in The Order of the Phoenix, through Snape's memories, is not a noble hero. He's a bully. He struts through the corridors of Hogwarts, hexing students for fun, mocking Severus Snape in front of a crowd, and, perhaps most disturbing of all, openly trying to impress Lily by humiliating someone she repeatedly asked him to leave alone. Lily's feelings are made clear in that same memory. When James dangles Snape upside down by his ankle, Lily approaches and scolds him. "Leave him alone." James shrugs it off with a smirk and says, "I will if you go out with me, Evans. It's not charming, it's coercive." James uses someone else's suffering as a bargaining chip for Lily's affection, reducing her voice to a condition of his amusement. And what's worse, he seems convinced that his behavior is justified because he likes her. That belief that desire somehow erases disrespect is one of the most troubling elements of James's pursuit of Lily. The books often gloss over how long James pursued Lily. We're told that she only agreed to date him in their 7th year, after he matured. But what does that mean exactly? For 6 years, she said no, 6 years of rejecting his advances, distancing herself from his behavior, aligning herself with people he despised. Her friendship with Snape, strained and tragic as it was, stood as a declaration of her independence from James's world. She wasn't impressed by his status as a chaser, nor by his popularity. And still he kept trying. There's something exhausting about that kind of pursuit. For Lily, every hallway might have meant another attempt, another flirtation, another moment where her no was treated like a challenge, not a boundary. In the wizarding world, where magic offers endless ways to intervene in someone's life, that kind of obsession becomes even more dangerous. It's easy to romanticize the idea of persistence, to call it loyalty or devotion. But when someone repeatedly ignores your wishes, it stops being romantic. It starts becoming a refusal to see you as a person. Even when they did end up together, there's no real insight into how James began treating Lily differently. Did he start listening more? Did he ask what she wanted, or did he assume that being good was enough? We know he joined the Order of the Phoenix, that he fought against Voldemort, that he became a father. These are admirable things, but they're not the same as emotional maturity. Fighting in a war doesn't mean you know how to respect someone's autonomy. One of the few times we hear about James from Lily herself is in a letter she wrote to Sirius, which Harry finds in Grimmauld Place. She writes, "James is making me laugh. He's been trying to jinx the doorknob because he says it squeaks at night and wakes Harry. It's a sweet image, James as a young father, clumsy and affectionate, but it also reveals how easily he can get wrapped up in small obsessions, even magical ones." That same energy directed toward Lily in school wasn't cute, it was oppressive, and it makes one wonder, did James ever truly stop centering himself in every situation? The question that lingers is this: when Lily finally said yes, was it because James had changed, or because she had simply given up fighting? By their 7th year, the war was escalating, the wizarding world was darkening, young people were dying, and Lily, a muggle-born witch constantly reminded of her impurity, may have been searching for safety, connection, and something resembling hope. James, for all his faults, did love her. But love without respect is a hollow thing. The narrative that James won her over suggests that Lily was a prize. Something to be won. A reward for good behavior. But Lily wasn't a trophy. She was one of the brightest witches of her generation, known for her compassion, her intelligence, and her strength. The idea that she changed her mind only when James became worthy of her turns her into a passive character in her own love story. In truth, we never really get to hear her voice after she accepts him. That silence speaks volumes. Severus Snape, for all his flaws and darkness, at least heard Lily. When he called her a mudblood, it destroyed their friendship because Lily expected better. She had standards, boundaries, a clear sense of who she was. James trampled over those boundaries for years. And when he finally won, the books simply move on, as if the pursuit itself was noble. But what if it wasn't? What if it was just relentless? In Deathly Hallows, when Harry visits Godric's Hollow, he sees the graves of his parents. They're buried side by side, eternally linked in memory. And yet we know so little about their actual relationship. We know they died protecting Harry. We know they fought against darkness. But what about the small things? Did Lily get to pursue her passions? Was she allowed to be more than a wife and mother? Or did James's ambitions continue to shape the rhythm of their lives? Number 17. Lily used James to forget Snape. It's easy to look at Lily and James Potter and see the perfect couple. Brave, beautiful, united against the darkness. But what if the story we've been told is only part of the truth? What if, behind the Gryffindor smiles and heroic deaths, lies something far more human? A quiet heartbreak buried under duty and survival? There's a theory, long whispered among devoted readers, that Lily Evans didn't truly fall for James Potter out of love, but out of desperation to erase the pain of Severus Snape. That she used him not out of cruelty, but out of a deep, unresolved sorrow. Lily and Severus had a connection that began in childhood, a bond rooted in understanding and shared loneliness. Severus, the poor boy from Spinner's End, had little more than his talent and his hunger for knowledge. Lily, with her bright green eyes and fierce sense of right and wrong, saw through the darkness of his world and gave him a friendship that was nothing short of salvation. But when that friendship shattered under the weight of prejudice, ambition, and one unforgivable word, mudblood, it left scars that neither of them would ever truly heal. In the Order of the Phoenix, when Snape shows Harry the memory of his worst moment, we don't just see a cruel teenager tormenting his classmates. We see a boy who realizes with a mix of horror and guilt that he's lost the only person who ever truly cared for him. I never meant. Snape chokes, but Lily walks away. Her eyes, usually so full of warmth, are distant. It was the end of something powerful, something sacred. But could Lily really have walked away so easily? Many fans argue that she never did. That even after she cut ties with Severus, his presence lingered in her mind. The pain of his betrayal was matched only by the pain of her love. He was her first emotional anchor, the first person to make her feel truly seen. And that kind of connection doesn't vanish, even when it breaks. Lily might have walked away with her pride intact, but not with her heart whole. James Potter then enters not as the romantic hero, but as a symbol of safety. He was everything Severus was not: popular, respected, adored by his peers. He stood in sharp contrast to the darkness that clouded Snape. James was the light at the end of Lily's storm. But was he the destination, or simply the escape route? It's worth noting that Lily didn't return James's feelings for years. Even when James tried to impress her with flashy stunts or public declarations, she remained unimpressed. "You think you're funny," she snaps at him in Snape's memory, "but you're just an arrogant, bullying toe rag." So what changed? Was it James who transformed into someone worthy of her love, as the common narrative suggests? Or was it Lily who shifted, who made a conscious decision to choose something simpler, less painful? Imagine carrying the burden of a lost friendship, the kind that once meant everything to you, and knowing that the man you once believed in had chosen a path of darkness. Choosing James might not have been a matter of passion. It might have been a quiet surrender, a white flag raised in the name of moving on. Lily and James married quickly after Hogwarts. The war was raging and the world was collapsing into chaos. Many couples rushed into relationships during that time, clinging to each other for comfort, not necessarily love. They needed something, anything to believe in. In this light, Lily's choice makes sense. James offered not just safety, but a clear side in the moral war. He wasn't complicated like Sirius. He didn't tread the line between darkness and light. He was all light, all boldness. And perhaps that's what Lily needed most. Not a partner, but a lighthouse. But the shadow of Severus never truly left. Dumbledore once told Harry, "You see what you expect to see, Severus," when Snape claimed that James had got the girl. But what if Dumbledore, as wise as he was, missed something too? What if Severus wasn't just bitter and jealous, but right to believe that Lily's heart had never fully belonged to James? That her silence in those final months, the way she never spoke of Snape again, wasn't closure, but grief sealed shut. There's something haunting about the way Snape loved Lily until his last breath. In the Deathly Hallows, when he shows Dumbledore his Patronus, a doe, the same as Lily's, the old headmaster is visibly shaken. "After all this time?" he asks. "Always," Snape replies. The world latched on to that moment as proof of Snape's undying love. But what if it also tells us something about Lily? That her memory, her presence, her emotional imprint was strong enough to linger in someone's soul forever, because she had once loved him back. The truth is, toxic relationships don't end neatly. They leave threads that tug and pull for years. Lily might have known that being with Severus would have destroyed her, but that doesn't mean she didn't want him. It means she was strong enough to walk away, but not immune to regret. James, for all his love and devotion, may have sensed that too. There's a quiet sadness in the fact that Harry knows almost nothing about his mother's past. James never told him, and perhaps Lily didn't either. Some ghosts are too fragile to name. When Harry discovers Snape's memories, he sees Lily in a new light, not just as a mother, but as a girl who once cried, laughed, argued, and forgave. He sees the way Snape looked at her, and more importantly, the way she looked at him. There's no romantic music in those scenes, no declarations. But there's a tension, a sorrowful, unresolved energy that suggests their story was never truly finished. Just interrupted, number 18, Lily didn't understand the world she lived in. Lily Evans was brilliant, talented, loved by her professors, admired by classmates. Her eyes sparkled with intelligence, and her spells were clean, sharp, confident. She could disarm a grown wizard with a flick of her wand and still find the time to help a first year struggling with levitation charms. But for all her wisdom and kindness, there was something she never quite grasped, something dark and brutal that pulsed just beneath the surface of her world. A truth she refused to acknowledge until it was too late. From her first day at Hogwarts, Lily saw the world through a lens that filtered out its shadows, even as the wizarding world began to fracture. Even as whispers of Voldemort's rise grew louder in the halls, Lily held on to a belief that reason, love, and understanding could solve anything. It wasn't naivety in the childish sense. No, she was too clever for that. But there was a refusal in her heart, a stubborn hope that the world was still redeemable, and that people, even those lost to darkness, could be called back. Severus Snape was one of those people. To Lily, he was never just a Slytherin with an obsession for the dark arts. He was the boy from Spinner's End, the boy who had shown her a world beyond Privet Drive. He had told her about magic before anyone else. "You're not a freak," he had whispered to her in a field full of dandelions. "You're brilliant. You're a witch." He had shared secrets and spells, drawn her into a world of wonder, and Lily never forgot. So when others began to pull away from Severus, Lily stayed. Even when he called her a mudblood in the middle of the courtyard, the word sharp as broken glass, she didn't see a Death Eater in the making. She saw a boy consumed by the pain of rejection. She believed that if she just tried harder, stayed longer, loved deeper, she could bring him back. "But I can't pretend to understand the dark arts, and I don't want to be around people who are interested in them," she had told him gently. "You've chosen your way, I've chosen mine." And yet, even after that, a part of her still watched the path he walked and waited for him to turn around. Her refusal to accept that he wouldn't change, that some choices are permanent, haunted her until her death. While James Potter was out joining the Order of the Phoenix, dueling Death Eaters in the dead of night, Lily was still writing in her diary about the boy she once knew. "He was lost," she wrote once, "but I should have reached for him one more time." She could not see that her empathy had become a kind of blindness. She wasn't blind to the war, not entirely. She knew Voldemort was dangerous. She feared for Harry. But she didn't truly grasp the ideological depth of the conflict. To her, it was about good versus evil, yes, but also about misunderstanding. "They weren't always like this," she told Marlene McKinnon once during a meeting of the Order. "Something broke them." Marlene had only shaken her head. "Lily," she had said, "these people aren't broken, they're willing. They chose this." But Lily believed in redemption. She couldn't see that some people didn't want to be saved. Even when she and James were put under Fidelius' charm, even when Dumbledore warned them of a prophecy that painted Harry as a target, Lily was more concerned with what had gone wrong in people's hearts than with how to defend herself. She still believed that if Voldemort could see the love in her eyes, he might turn away. That was her flaw, her fatal flaw. She believed words could win wars. She believed love could stop a curse. And for a moment, a single, shining moment, she was right. Her love protected Harry. Her sacrifice became the shield that Voldemort could not pass. But it came at the cost of her life and her illusion. Had she truly seen the world she lived in, had she understood the seductive pull of blood purity, of power, of rage, she might have prepared differently. She might have known that Severus's apology, whispered too late into Dumbledore's ear, would not unmake the unforgivable. She might have known that kindness has limits when it meets cruelty that is chosen, embraced, and worshipped. Even her relationship with James was built on this illusion. She believed that he had changed. And maybe he had, but she also believed that change was simple, that it came easily, naturally, to those who wanted to be better. What she didn't understand was that most people didn't want to be better, they wanted to win. James had changed because the world had changed him through fear and war and love, but Severus had chosen not to. In the shadows, Death Eaters carved the dark mark into the sky and into their skin. Children were tortured, families disappeared, and Lily still thought that a letter, a meeting, a moment of truth might be enough to stop it all. She was the heart of the resistance, but not its spine. She gave it hope, but not direction. Her conversations with Dumbledore revealed her idealism most clearly. He had told her, "You must be ready, Lily. Love is powerful, yes, but Voldemort does not fear love. He fears death." But Lily, perhaps more than anyone, wanted to believe that love and death were not opposites, that death could be undone by love. She didn't realize that love, in the face of true evil, sometimes becomes a weapon too, but one that must be wielded decisively, with clarity and sacrifice. The most tragic part of Lily's story is that she wasn't wrong. Not entirely. Her love did save Harry. Her defiance did defeat Voldemort in part. But she never saw the cost. She didn't live to see her son grow up. She didn't see the years of fear and chaos that followed. She didn't see the guilt in Severus's eyes when he held Harry's photo in his hand, whispering, "Always." Her kindness became a ghost, haunting every corner of the war. Remus Lupin once said to Sirius, "She was the best of us, you know, but she never saw it coming. Not really." Sirius had looked away and muttered, "That's because she didn't want to." When Harry finally saw her in the mirror of Erest, he didn't see a warrior. He saw a mother, a smile, a touch. Lily's legacy was love, pure and radiant, but it was not strategic. It was not armed. And in a world torn apart by ideology and violence, love alone wasn't enough. In the end, Severus Snape begged Voldemort to spare her. "Hide them all, then," Snape had told Dumbledore. "Keep them, safe, please." But Lily's fate had already been sealed, not just by prophecy, not just by the Dark Lord, but by her refusal to believe in the finality of evil. She couldn't comprehend that the boy from Spinner's End had become a man who stood beside murderers. She couldn't accept that the world she loved had changed, had curdled, had become a battlefield. She clung to her old beliefs like a charm that would protect her. But the world did not bend to kindness. Not then. This is what makes her story not just heroic, but tragic. She wasn't a martyr who ran toward death. She was a woman who believed she could still outrun it. She wrote to Petunia, hoping to fix the cracks in their relationship. She sent gifts to Sirius and Remus, still believing in reconciliation. She even dreamed once of returning to Hogwarts, of teaching there. She had applied, Dumbledore later told McGonagall. She never heard back. War came too quickly. Lily Evans was not blind, but she chose not to see everything. She filtered the world through hope, and sometimes, in doing so, she turned away from truths that might have saved her. She died protecting her son, and for that she is immortal, but she also died believing that the world could be healed with enough light. She did not see that sometimes light must be wielded like a blade, and that's the story the books never fully tell, the story of a brilliant witch who believed in love too much to prepare for hate, a woman who looked into the eyes of evil and saw the boy she once knew, a mother who believed, to her final breath, that everything could still be made right, if only she held on. Lily Evans was not naive, but she was faithful, and in a world that punished faith, she was left to pay the price. Number 19, James was obsessed with being a hero. James Potter didn't just strut through the corridors of Hogwarts like a confident teenager. He soared, capeless, but every bit the peacock. His wand hand always ready for drama, his smirk a permanent accessory. Those who saw him in his prime say there was something magnetic about him, like a boy who had read too many stories about gallant knights and made it his personal mission to live up to them. But as we peer closer into the life of the man who gave Harry his name and his eyes, we must ask, was James Potter truly a hero or merely infatuated with the idea of being one? During their 5th year, James and Sirius Black famously ambushed Severus Snape by the Black Lake. It was a sunny afternoon. Students were relaxing after their OWLs, the air lazy and golden, and there, in the middle of the crowd, James, laughing, hoisted Snape upside down by his ankle with a flick of his wand. Lily Evans, nearby, was horrified. She stormed over, demanded that James stop. "Leave him alone!" she shouted. James lowered Snape, but not before offering Lily a wink and running his fingers through his perpetually wind-blown hair. "Did you like that?" he asked her. "That was nothing. Watch me do something even more impressive." This scene, described in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, wasn't an isolated moment. It was a snapshot of a boy obsessed with being seen as daring, bold, heroic, even if it meant bullying someone to get the spotlight. It's worth noting that James didn't perform that act in private, nor to protect someone, nor even in retaliation. It was a show, a public spectacle. The audience was as important to him as the spell he cast. That moment is often excused by fans as a phase, a mistake of youth. But what if it wasn't just a phase? What if it was the clearest window into James's inner world, one ruled not by justice or courage, but by an insatiable need to be admired? James grew up in privilege, loved and spoiled by his parents. Euphemia and Fleamont Potter had him later in life and doted on their only son with all the affection they had long waited to give. He never heard no. He never had to prove his worth the hard way. This environment can create confidence, certainly, but also entitlement. James didn't want to be just another clever student at Hogwarts. He wanted to be a legend, and legends need antagonists. Enter Severus Snape. Poor half-blood, awkward and obsessed with the dark arts, Snape was everything James wasn't, and perhaps everything James feared becoming. Their rivalry was more than schoolboy conflict. For James, Snape became a foil, a convenient villain to play the hero against. Whether Snape deserved it or not seemed beside the point. What mattered was the image. James, wands blazing, defending his ideals, with a crowd watching. But heroism isn't performance. It's not about who claps for you at the end of the duel. Real heroism is quieter, often lonelier. When Sirius Black tricked Snape into almost entering the Shrieking Shack during a full moon, knowing Remus Lupin was inside, transformed, James did intervene. He stopped Snape at the last moment, probably saving his life. It was a brave thing to do, but even then the lines blur. Had James told a teacher? No. Had he confronted Sirius, his closest friend? Not really. He pulled Snape away and then swore him to secrecy. He wasn't protecting Snape so much as protecting his friends and himself from the consequences of a deadly prank gone too far. Was it bravery or damage control? What complicates James's story even more is his later transformation. By their 7th year, he was head boy, a Quidditch hero. Still yes, but more subdued, more mature. Lily Evans finally said yes to a date. The swagger remained, but it softened. He had begun to fight against real darkness now, the kind that wasn't confined to schoolyard rivalries. Voldemort was rising, and James chose a side. That matters. And yet, was this transformation a true change of heart, or was it the natural evolution of someone who finally found a stage big enough for his hero complex? The war offered James what school never could, a real fight, a real enemy, and real stakes. And like any boy raised on tales of knights and dragons, James dove in head first. Sirius Black once said he was a good person, a bit of an idiot. He grew out of it. That might be true, but what's left unsaid is this. James didn't stop wanting to be a hero. He just found a better way to live it. The Marauders were no longer just pranksters, they were revolutionaries, secretly becoming animagi to support Remus through his transformations. That was illegal, risky, and brilliant. It was also done in secret. No applause, no audience. That perhaps was James's first real brush with true heroism. Still, the question haunts us. If Voldemort had never risen, if the war had never come, would James have grown up the same way? Or would he have remained a rich, arrogant man chasing spotlights, challenging rivals, and basking in admiration? The ultimate act of James Potter's life, the one that canonically defines him, is his death. He stood between Voldemort and his wife and child, wandless, unarmed, and unflinching. "Lily, take Harry and go, it's him. Go, run, I'll hold him off." That's what we're told. That's the moment that crowns him a hero. But there's something ironic about that moment too. James died exactly the way he always imagined himself, facing evil, protecting the innocent, standing tall. It was not a performance this time. There was no one watching. And yet it was the most James thing he ever did. Just maybe, the boy who always wanted to be a hero finally became one when no one was looking. Still, that doesn't erase the years of swagger and showmanship. Those moments were real, and they left scars on those around him. Severus Snape never forgot the humiliation. Lily Evans never fully forgave it until she saw a different man by 7th year. And Harry only knew the legend. "You'll look just like your father," people always said. But Harry's sense of right and wrong, his humility, his constant self-doubt, those were not his father's traits. Those were Lily's. Perhaps James's greatest legacy isn't who he was, but who he wanted to be. And maybe that aspiration, flawed and theatrical as it was, gave his son something to live up to. There's a certain tragedy in that. James wanted to be remembered. He wanted the stories. He wanted the admiration. And he got them, but not in life. In death, he became the man he always pretended to be. Dumbledore once said, "It is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." James made a final choice, and it was the right one. But was that one choice enough to define a life? Remus Lupin once described James as someone who always knew the right thing to do after he tried everything else. That's both a compliment and a caution. James had to grow into his better self. He wasn't born noble. He played at being noble until the moment called for something real. And then, at last, he answered. But many never got to see that version of him. For them, James was the arrogant boy who bullied weaker students, who hexed Slytherins for fun, who kissed the air around Lily Evans and called it love. For Snape, he was the embodiment of cruelty disguised as charisma. And yet for Harry, James was the father who died to save him. That truth cannot be erased. Harry never saw the boy behind the legend. He only knew the sacrifice. So was James Potter a hero, or just a boy who played at being one? The answer is both. He was flawed, arrogant, impulsive, but he was also brave, loyal, and ultimately selfless. He didn't begin as a hero, he had to earn it. And in the end, perhaps that's the most human kind of heroism of all. Number 20. Their death is romanticized too much. They are remembered with roses, whispered with reverence. Lily and James Potter, the golden couple of the wizarding world, the youthful martyrs who died too soon. Their names are carved into the collective memory of the magical community, symbols of love's final triumph over death. "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death," Harry's parents whisper from the stone in Godric's Hollow. But death in their case has been polished into a legend, the sharp edges dulled by time and the haze of sentiment. People remember the sacrifice, yes, but they often forget the choices that led them there. It was not just Voldemort's wand that killed them, it was a chain of human mistakes, small and large. And maybe, if the wizarding world wishes to truly honor them, it must look unflinchingly at those decisions. Because heroism isn't simply about love, it's also about responsibility. And the Potters, for all their bravery, made choices that cost them and Harry everything. Consider Peter Pettigrew, the boy who once laughed with James and Sirius under the Hogwarts stars, who carried their books and echoed their jokes. A member of the Marauders, a brother in all but blood. Dumbledore himself once said, "The best of us sometimes harbour the worst secrets." And Peter harboured his well. The Potters trusted him with their lives. They made him secret keeper when Voldemort was hunting them like game. "They would have died rather than tell me where he was," Sirius would later spit, shattered and furious. But Peter didn't have the guts for that. Why Peter? That is the question that still stings. They could have chosen Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of the age, or even Sirius, their closest friend and Harry's godfather. But fear clouded their judgment. "Voldemort will expect me," Sirius had argued. "He won't look twice at Peter." And so they agreed, hiding behind strategy what might have been mistrust. But was it strategy or was it naivety, perhaps even arrogance, to entrust their son's life to the weakest among them? Sirius Black had tried to warn them. He had felt the weight of the moment in his bones. But by the time he arrived at the little cottage in Godric's Hollow, the house was already broken, the street silent in horror. "Lily! James!" he had screamed through the ruins. Hagrid, with Harry bundled in his arms, refused to give him the baby. "Dumbledore's orders," the half-giant had murmured. And Sirius had fallen to his knees, not with grief, but with guilt, because deep down he knew it could have been different. Then there's the question of the Fidelius charm itself. The most powerful protective magic known, yes, but also a fragile one, reliant entirely on a single person. Dumbledore had offered to be their secret keeper. He was safer, respected, unlikely to be captured or turned. But James and Lily declined. Pride? A desire to keep the secret among friends? We will never know. What is certain is that their trust in Pettigrew was not born of logic, but of sentiment. And sentiment, when unchecked, can be fatal. Lily's sacrifice, her act of pure love, is rightly remembered as a beacon. It saved Harry, placed a shield of magic on him so ancient even Voldemort did not understand it. To have been loved so deeply, Dumbledore tells Harry in Philosopher's Stone, will give us some protection forever. But what is often forgotten is that she was given the choice to live. Voldemort had intended only to kill the child. He offered her mercy. "Stand aside, girl," he snarled. "Stand aside if you love your son." But Lily refused. It was the right choice, the brave one, but also the last in a string of decisions made in desperation. There is something uncomfortable in the idea that Lily and James, as young and brilliant as they were, could also be flawed, but perhaps that is the more important truth. James, once a bullying teenager, had grown, but still carried pride like a banner. He had taunted Severus Snape for years, mocked him publicly, and left a trail of resentment that would fuel consequences no one could foresee. Snape, the boy he humiliated, would one day carry the memory of Lily like a wound and betray a prophecy that would change the world. The prophecy itself, uttered by Sybil Trelawney in the upstairs room at the Hog's Head, was a whisper in the dark. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Snape only heard part of it, yet that part was enough. He ran to Voldemort with the news, never imagining that it would be Lily's child Voldemort would seek. When he realized it was already too late, he fell to his knees, begging the Dark Lord to spare her. "Anything, anything," he pleaded. And Voldemort, amused, promised to try. A flicker of mercy from the most merciless being in existence, only because of the boy who once despised her husband. Snape's role complicates the tale further. Without his betrayal, Voldemort may never have targeted Harry at all. But without James's cruelty, Snape may never have turned so bitter, so desperate to prove himself. The past is a spiderweb, each thread touching another. We cannot honor the victims without acknowledging the tapestry. Harry, as he grows, must grapple with the myth of his parents. He is told they were brave, wonderful, kind, and they were. But he is also told, quietly by Lupin, that they were young. "They were the best people I knew," Lupin says. "But they were not perfect." That line is often overlooked. It should not be, because perfection is dangerous. When we turn people into icons, we strip them of their humanity. We stop asking questions, we stop learning. Harry idolized his father until the pensive showed him the truth. "I wouldn't like me either," he muttered, after witnessing James dangle Snape upside down, laughing. It was a necessary moment, painful but clarifying. He loved them more because he finally saw them clearly. Romanticizing death is easy. It makes grief easier to swallow, but it also clouds responsibility. The Potters joined the Order of the Phoenix, knowing the risks. They believed in the fight, they stood up, and they paid the price. But they also made mistakes that should not be repeated, choosing Peter, rejecting Dumbledore's help, trusting too blindly, assuming they had more time. The tragedy of their death is not only that they died, it's that they didn't have to. That is what makes it so heartbreaking. That is why we must tell the whole story. Not to shame them, but to remember them fully. Remus Lupin, left alone, would carry the burden of survivors' guilt until his own death. "They all died," he whispered once. "They were my friends, my family." But he too was kept in the dark. He hadn't even known about the switch to Peter. No one told him. Why? Because werewolves weren't to be trusted, not even when they were brothers in arms. The Marauders, once inseparable, had shattered before the first spell was even cast that night. Sirius, imprisoned without trial. Peter, hidden in rat's fur. James and Lily, dead. And the only one who survived was the child, marked, not saved. A scar does not feel like salvation, and yet the world tells Harry his parents were heroes, and they were, but they were also human, and that duality matters. They fought for what was right, but they made choices from fear, love, pride, and hope, and those choices had consequences, real ones, final ones. When Harry stands in the forest facing death himself, he thinks of them. "You'll stay with me?" he whispers, and they do. In that moment, they are with him, not as gods or saints, but as the people who gave everything. And still, somewhere in the silence, we must wonder what they would have changed if given another chance. Would they have chosen Sirius? Would they have accepted Dumbledore's help? Would they have waited just one more week to make that final decision? We don't know, but we can learn from the uncertainty. We can teach the next generation that love, while powerful, must be accompanied by caution, that loyalty must be earned, not assumed, that bravery is not the absence of fear, but the awareness of risk and the strength to confront it wisely. Lily and James did not die in vain, but let us not pretend their path was flawless. Let us not turn their lives into a tale too tidy to be true. Let us tell it honestly, because only then does their sacrifice truly matter. Only then can it teach. And so when we speak of them, let us speak not only of their deaths, but of their lives, their arguments, their growth, their faults, their triumphs. Let us remember Lily, who loved fiercely but perhaps forgave too easily. Let us remember James, who matured but never fully escaped the shadow of his youth. Let us remember them as they were, not as legends but as people. For it is in their imperfections that we find the most powerful truth, that even the best among us can fall, that even the brave can misjudge, and that heroism is not about being perfect. It's about standing up despite everything and still choosing love. But never forget, love alone isn't enough. Not in war, not in the face of Voldemort, not when the lives of others hang in the balance. Let their story be not only one of love's triumph, but also a solemn lesson in the price of trust, the weight of decision, and the unforgiving nature of fate. Number 21, they weren't ready to be parents. They were young, brave, and undeniably in love. But that wasn't enough. In the eye of a storm, when the world around them was cracking under the weight of a war they couldn't escape, James and Lily Potter made the most fragile and dangerous decision of their lives, and they brought a child into it, a child who would be marked before he could even speak. Perhaps it was hope that led them there, a desperate grasp for normalcy in an abnormal time, or maybe it was denial. Either way, they weren't prepared, not for the world they were in, and certainly not for the task of protecting the most hunted baby in magical history. Lily Evans had always been exceptional, a muggle-born witch with immense talent and a strong moral compass. She had every reason to be careful. She'd seen firsthand what the world thought of people like her. The rise of Voldemort wasn't just a newspaper headline to her, it was a direct threat. And James Potter, for all his arrogance at Hogwarts, matured into a fiercely loyal man, someone who fought for what he believed in. They joined the Order of the Phoenix, putting themselves in constant danger. They fought for the light, but fighting and parenting are not the same. They confused their courage for preparedness. They mistook resistance for protection. Sirius Black, perhaps the one who knew James best, once said, "You think the dead we loved ever truly leave us?" That was Dumbledore's voice, yes, but Sirius lived it. He watched his best friend vanish in a green flash and left a child behind who had no idea what had just happened. Sirius loved that boy, but even he must have wondered, why didn't James and Lily leave? Why didn't they hide better? Why didn't they flee? Because they believed in the power of secrecy. They trusted a Fidelius charm more than common sense. When Voldemort's name was enough to freeze the air in a room, they stayed in the country near enough to be found. They placed their son's life in the hands of someone else's secrecy. And in the end, that someone betrayed them. Peter Pettigrew, the choice of secret keeper that destroyed everything. James, ever the loyal friend, ignored the risks. Dumbledore would have taken the role. He offered it. But James, in his youthful defiance, said no. He thought it would be too obvious. He thought he was being clever. "We've switched secret keepers," Sirius told Remus after their deaths. "It's the perfect plan." But it wasn't. It was a fatal one. Harry Potter was 15 months old when Voldemort came for him. 15 months. He hadn't spoken his first full sentence. He hadn't learned fear, but he was already marked, already hated, already hunted. And Lily, bless her, brave soul, stood between her child and death. She refused to stand aside. She died for him. That act, in its rawest form, saved Harry's life, but it should never have come to that. Why didn't they leave? Why didn't they go to another country? The Ministry was failing. Death Eaters had infiltrated every level. Diagon Alley wasn't safe. Even the Hogwarts Express was a risk. The Potters had means, they had wealth, they had friends abroad, but they chose to stay. "We're staying to fight," James told Sirius, according to Order members who remembered those meetings. "This is our war." But was it Harry's war? They were young, 21. Younger than many students who returned to Hogwarts for their final year. In any other world, they would have been newlyweds finding their footing. Instead, they were soldiers. And then, suddenly, parents. That kind of pressure distorts judgment. Love becomes a shield, not a strategy. They assumed that their child, born of a prophecy or not, would somehow be protected by the very bravery that made them fight. They didn't consider that prophecy makes targets, not heroes. There were safe houses, the Order had them. Dumbledore had resources that no one else did. James and Lily used some of them, yes, but always with the confidence that they were untouchable if the charm held. But protection built on trust in unstable people isn't protection at all. Peter Pettigrew, cowardly and cornered, gave them up within a week, and that's all it took. A week. In Godric's Hollow, the night was quiet. It was Halloween. Children were trick-or-treating just down the road. Lily sang to Harry, placing him in his crib, unaware that death was already on its way. James didn't even have his wand when Voldemort entered the house. He didn't expect to fight. He thought they were safe. "Lily, take Harry and go. It's him. Go, run. I'll hold him off." Those were his last words. Noble. Heartbreaking. But unnecessary if caution had come before bravery. They loved their son. That is not in question. Every memory that returns to Harry through dreams or spells confirms it. "You'll be okay," Lily whispered. "You are loved." But love cannot catch a curse. Love cannot hold a door shut. Love is not a shield unless it is made of action, not just feeling. And in that they failed, because they didn't act like hunted parents. They acted like warriors. And warriors are taught to face danger, not flee from it. In the Order of the Phoenix, Harry screams at Dumbledore, "You knew this was coming." It's a cry, not just of pain, but of frustration. He lived in a cupboard. He was lied to for years. And the war that took his parents kept taking everything else. Would his life have been different if James and Lily had been more cautious? If they had used their resources to flee? If they had fought from afar? Maybe, maybe not. But they never gave him the chance to grow in peace. Remus Lupin, in the Deathly Hallows, expresses guilt when Tonks gives birth during the Second War. "I am a coward," he says. "I should never have married her. I have put her in danger. I have put our son in danger." That awareness was absent in James. In Lily, they never spoke of the burden they placed on a newborn child. They simply carried on, brave, blind. And what of the protections they did try? The Fidelius was the only line of defense. No guards, no enchantments, no backup. When Dumbledore found Harry, the house was in ruins. No wards had triggered alarms. No one came in time, because the Potters had placed all their faith in a single spell and a single man. They didn't build layers. They didn't prepare for betrayal. They didn't imagine the worst. And so the worst came. When Harry arrives at number 4 Privet Drive, he is not just an orphan. He is a symbol of a gamble that failed. The boy who lived was also the boy left vulnerable. Albus Dumbledore makes decisions from that point on to protect him, not because the Potters planned for it, but because they didn't. Everything that shields Harry afterward is reactive, not preemptive. In The Half-Blood Prince, we learn how Voldemort chose Harry. He could have chosen Neville, but he sensed the threat in a child born of those who defied him thrice. James and Lily, stubborn, daring, predictable. And that predictability is what doomed them. Voldemort knew they wouldn't run, knew they would fight, knew where to look. Imagine, if you will, a different ending, one where James and Lily flee to Canada or Australia. They raise Harry in quiet, watching from afar as the war unfolds. Dumbledore defeats Voldemort another way, or delays the prophecy's fulfillment. Maybe Harry grows up hearing stories of his brave parents, but from their own mouths. Maybe he knows love and safety. Instead, Harry grows in silence. He knows of his parents through second-hand tales, through foggy memories and photographs. He sees them in the mirror of Erist and weeps. "I see my mum and dad," he tells Ron. "They're waving at me." That should never have been his only vision of them. It's easy to mythologize James and Lily, to wrap them in the ribbon of martyrdom and call it perfect love. But they were human. They made mistakes. And their biggest mistake was believing that loving their child was enough. It wasn't. And Harry paid the price every year he returned to Privet Drive. Even Sirius, in his last days, was haunted by the past. He saw in Harry the echo of James and perhaps blamed himself. "I should never have let them use Peter," he said. But Sirius also followed their lead. He was part of that same circle of trust, a circle that cracked when tested. Harry forgives them. He names his son after them. He honors them. But that does not mean they were right. It only means he loved them despite the fallout of their choices. And that is what makes Harry truly remarkable. Not the scar, not the fame, but the ability to rise above the childhood that was handed to him like a broken wand. They weren't ready. And in a world at war, that mattered more than anything. Because love, while powerful, is not a plan, and courage, while noble, is not always wise. James and Lily Potter loved deeply, but they didn't protect wisely, and the child they left behind had to learn that difference the hard way. Number 22, they forgave Sirius too easily. The cottage in Godric's Hollow was quiet that Halloween night, wrapped in a deceptive calm. Behind its enchanted walls, Lily read to baby Harry, while James practiced wand movements with a quiet confidence. Outside, danger brewed like a storm, invisible but imminent. Within 24 hours, both would be dead. A child would be orphaned, and a friend, the best friend, would be in chains, accused of betrayal so vile no words could redeem him. But decades later, when the truth came out, it raised a question far darker than betrayal. Why didn't Sirius Black know he wasn't the secret keeper? For years, the wizarding world believed Sirius had sold James and Lily to Voldemort. He was the obvious suspect, fierce, reckless, and above all, the best man. The logic was tragically straightforward. Who else had been close enough to know the Potter's location, hidden by the Fidelius charm? Who else would have the motive if not he, the fiery, troubled Black? Yet when Sirius finally escaped Azkaban and revealed the truth to Harry in The Prisoner of Azkaban, the foundation of that story cracked wide open. "Peter Pettigrew is the secret keeper, not me," Sirius said, with a bitterness only a decade of torment could sharpen. The entire tragedy hinges on one pivotal decision, the switch from Sirius to Peter. James and Lily, aware that Voldemort was closing in, changed their secret keeper at the last moment. But the question that haunts readers and historians alike is this: why didn't they tell Sirius? From Sirius's own words in the Shrieking Shack, the picture forms. "Peter was weak. James was the best friend I ever had. He trusted me," he confessed, pacing like a man whose soul had been broken and stitched together wrong. And yet, despite that trust, James chose to make Peter the secret keeper, fearing Sirius was too obvious a target. But if James truly trusted Sirius, why not include him in the decision? Why allow Sirius to become the decoy without his knowledge? This decision reeks of rushed judgment and tragic irony. In trying to outmaneuver Voldemort, the Potters may have outmaneuvered themselves, and the consequences catastrophic. Peter betrayed them. Sirius, unaware of the switch, raced to Godric's Hollow the night of their deaths, only to find wreckage and silence. He must have screamed. We don't know what he did, but the image of a man crumbling in the ruins of his best friend's life paints itself vividly. It is easy to romanticize the marauders, James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter, as a band of inseparable brothers. But brothers talk. Brothers share. What does it say that in their most desperate hour, James didn't confide in Sirius? Didn't at least say, "We're going with Peter instead"? One might argue it was for Sirius's safety, or perhaps the less obvious route, But such a choice carried terrible implications. It meant James did not trust Sirius to withstand Voldemort. It meant that despite years of loyalty, Sirius was considered a liability. And what of Lily? Intelligent, perceptive Lily? She who had once despised Sirius for his arrogance, but grew to accept him through James's friendship. Could she have raised objections? Could she have insisted that this decision be made with complete transparency? We will never know, but if she had doubts, she may have swallowed them to preserve peace. That silence, that failure to confront the elephant in the room, cost them everything. Then comes the aftermath. Sirius was arrested on the spot after the explosion that killed 13 Muggles and supposedly destroyed Peter. Aurors found him laughing, mad. He didn't resist arrest, didn't say a word in his defense, perhaps because he was broken, perhaps because he thought he deserved punishment for failing James. But none of this stopped the Order of the Phoenix from abandoning him. Even Remus Lupin believed Sirius guilty. "I thought it was you," he whispered, in The Prisoner of Azkaban, his voice trembling with grief. "I thought you betrayed James and Lily." He too had not been told about the switch, which deepens the tragedy further. No one was. James and Lily chose secrecy so absolute, even those who would die for them were left in the dark. But in doing so, they built a fragile glass tower. One betrayal, and it shattered. Years passed. Sirius rotted in Azkaban. And when he returned, finally free, did he rage at James and Lily for excluding him? No, he mourned them. He protected their son. He even cherished the photograph of the four of them laughing under the sun, unaware it would become a tombstone. Forgiveness came fast and unspoken, perhaps because Sirius believed he failed them too, perhaps because to him blame didn't matter anymore. But from a historian's eye, this forgiveness seems too swift, too clean. Shouldn't there have been bitterness? A question. "Why didn't you trust me, Prongs?" he might have asked in his dreams. "Why did you let me walk into hell without knowing the truth?" Sirius, proud and passionate, was never one to let betrayal slide, and yet in death James was beyond reproach. Was it guilt that kept Sirius silent, or a loyalty that transcended reason? Even Harry, when he learns the truth, doesn't dwell on it. He accepts that Sirius was wronged, but he never questions why Sirius was left in the dark in the first place. He never asks why the people who supposedly loved him most made him a scapegoat without even informing him. It's a silence that echoes too loudly. The more one looks, the more cracks appear. Dumbledore, too, never spoke up in Sirius's defense. In fact, when Hagrid said, in The Philosopher's Stone, "Sirius Black lent me his motorbike the night Lily and James died," Dumbledore did not question this act of apparent betrayal. Why would a traitor help rescue the child of the people he had just condemned? Why would he even be there unless he thought he had failed to protect them? This behavior doesn't align with that of a Death Eater. It aligns with a man who didn't know what had happened until it was too late. And yet, nobody, not Remus, not Dumbledore, not Minerva, questioned the story. It was neater that way. Easier. The war needed a villain, and so Sirius became the villain. But the irony is chilling. James didn't trust Sirius enough to tell him about the switch, yet entrusted him with the decoy role. That contradiction is fatal. It suggests either a lack of logic in their final decisions or a deeper fracture in their friendship, one we never saw because the books viewed James through the rose-tinted memories of those who loved him. One must also consider Peter. He was the weak one, the coward. Sirius knew this. He even said so in the shrieking shack. "I was your friend," he shouted at the rat, hiding in Ron's pocket. "You should have died rather than betray your friends, as we would have done for you." This wasn't just a condemnation, it was a revelation. Sirius and James would have died for each other, but James didn't believe Sirius would endure, and so he chose Peter. In that choice lies the wound, a wound that never healed. Because Peter didn't deserve that trust, he didn't carry the weight, and he broke, and the marauders died one way or another. The tragedy of it all is that it could have been prevented. A single conversation, a moment of honesty, a letter, a coded message. If James had trusted Sirius enough to say, "We're changing the plan," perhaps Sirius would have been more vigilant. Perhaps Peter wouldn't have escaped. Perhaps Voldemort wouldn't have found the Potters. Instead, everything hinged on a silent decision made in fear, not faith. The story teaches us many things about love, bravery, sacrifice, but it also teaches us about the price of silence, about how trust, once broken by omission, can lead to a chain of horrors. And it teaches us that even the strongest friendships can falter at the brink of war. Sirius forgave James. He never said it. He didn't have to. It was in the way he looked at Harry, in the way he risked everything to protect the last piece of his best friend. But perhaps we shouldn't let that forgiveness make us forget the original sin. That in their final hour the Potters trusted a rat over a brother. And Sirius, for all his loyalty, was never given the chance to prove them wrong. Number 23. Lily didn't understand the world she lived in. Lily Evans. To the average reader of the Harry Potter series, her name evokes images of gentleness, of a girl with emerald eyes and a kind heart, a mother who sacrificed herself for love. She's been framed in memory as the embodiment of compassion, Severus Snape's one bright light, Harry's source of magical protection, James Potter's moral compass. But what if that image is only part of the story? What if Lily Evans wasn't only the soft, forgiving figure we've been told she was? What if behind her kindness lay a fire fierce enough to fight, to kill, and to embrace war? Let's begin not with Lily's sacrifice, but with her life before it. We know Lily was a brilliant student, a Muggle-born witch who shone at Hogwarts. She wasn't just gifted, she was brave. And that bravery was more than just schoolyard courage. It matured into militant resistance. Lily joined the Order of the Phoenix, a group whose members regularly engaged in life-or-death battles against Voldemort's followers. This is not a group one joins lightly. There are no passive members of the Order, no sideline sympathizers. Every member had to accept the possibility that they might one day kill or be killed. When we speak of the Order, we often mention Alastor Moody, Sirius Black, Kingsley Shacklebolt, hardened fighters with battle scars and steely gazes. But Lily stood beside them. She took the same risks, swore the same oaths. Consider what this implies. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Sirius says, "The Order's been getting active again. Dumbledore's reformed it. We've had a few skirmishes already." The language is not metaphorical. Skirmishes mean wands drawn, curses flying, casualties taken. Lily was part of this world. She had to be ready to face the worst. One often overlooked fact is that Lily and James defied Voldemort 3 times before their deaths. 3 times. This is not a poetic flourish. It is a key prophecy detail. Dumbledore mentions this directly. He heard the prophecy and he knew the child who would defeat him would be born at the end of July to parents who had already defied him 3 times. What does it mean to defy the Dark Lord? Writing a strongly worded letter? No, it means engaging in direct confrontation, potentially fighting for their lives. For a young mother, barely out of school, to be repeatedly involved in these confrontations, she must have had more than just kindness in her heart. She had fire. We often forget that Lily grew up during war. Her formative years at Hogwarts were stained with rising tensions, whispered fears, and students disappearing. The First War didn't break out overnight. It crept into the dormitories, into the Daily Prophet, into the hearts of every young witch and wizard. And Lily chose not to hide. She did not vanish into anonymity like many Muggle-borns who fled the wizarding world when it turned dark. She stood her ground, and she fought. We know Lily had the power to defend herself. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Snape, during occlumency lessons, relives a memory where James is bullying him. Lily comes to Snape's defense, confronting James without hesitation. "Leave him alone!" she shouts, wand at the ready. This wasn't meekness. This was a girl who could stand down a teenage marauder with all the arrogance of a lion. Her voice rang with fury, not fear. Her defiance didn't stop with bullies. Lily made hard choices, the kind that carve a person into someone who can survive war. She severed her friendship with Snape, a boy she'd known for years, when he aligned himself with dark magic. After Snape calls her a mudblood, she doesn't excuse him. She doesn't forgive. She draws a line. "You've chosen your way. I've chosen mine." These are the words of someone who sees the world clearly, who understands that some paths can't coexist, that some loyalties, once broken, must remain shattered. Lily wasn't a pacifist. She was someone who loved deeply, yes, but love, in its truest form, is fierce. It defends. It does not turn away from battle when lives are at stake. The spell she died for, the protection charm, was not the act of a gentle martyr, but of a mother who chose to weaponize love against death itself. That's not softness, that's strategy. And if we're to believe Dumbledore, who said, "There is a room in the Department of Mysteries that is kept locked at all times. It contains a force that is at once more wonderful and more terrible than death," then Lily knew exactly what she was wielding. James Potter, known for his bravado and reckless bravery, fell in a matter of seconds during Voldemort's attack. He had no wand, but Lily. Lily was given a choice. Voldemort offered her mercy. "Stand aside, girl, stand aside." She refused. Again and again, Voldemort, the most feared wizard alive, gave her a way out, and she chose to die. That's not passivity, that's resistance in its rawest form. But why would Voldemort offer her mercy? Theories abound. Was it Snape's request? Certainly, but perhaps Voldemort recognized something in Lily. Power, conviction. Perhaps he sensed in her a witch, not unlike himself. Driven, unrelenting. He offered her mercy, not because she was harmless, but because she was dangerous in her own right. A mother who would rather die than yield is not someone to be underestimated. Let's talk again about the Order of the Phoenix. Members were often tasked with intelligence missions, sabotage, and yes, combat. We have no detailed battle logs, but we know that Order members were targeted, tortured, and killed. Lily survived these missions for how long we don't know, but she lasted until October 1981, well into the war. She endured. And endurance in a war zone is not achieved through gentle words and flower crowns. It comes from grit, strategy, and yes, an ability to fight when needed. Alastair Moody often referred to the importance of constant vigilance. One wonders what Lily would have learned from him. Was she trained by him? It's very possible. The Order was tightly knit. Their operations, according to Remus Lupin, were sometimes coordinated from headquarters in secret. Lily, as a core member, would have participated in these missions. She likely learned to duel, to track, to decipher code, not just a healer or letter writer, but an active agent of resistance. When Harry first sees his mother in the mirror of Erist, he doesn't hear her speak, but he feels something, an intensity, a presence. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, he describes her eyes green like his own. Readers have often romanticized them, but green is also the color of unforgiving storms, of vengeful curses. Avada Kedavra, the killing curse, is green. It's a stretch, yes, but not an impossible metaphor. Her eyes may have held more than warmth. They may have held rage. The tragedy of Lily's story is often that we never get to hear her voice directly. Everything we know comes from second-hand accounts: Snape's memory, Petunia's bitterness, Dumbledore's reverence. But what would Lily have said for herself? Would she have spoken of regret, of fear? Or would she have proudly owned her role as a soldier in a magical war? I suspect the latter. She was brave enough to defy Voldemort 3 times. That kind of bravery does not arise from meekness. And then there's Petunia. Her hatred for Lily wasn't just jealousy, it was fear. Fear of a sister who wielded immense power and didn't hide it. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Petunia whispers, "That awful boy, he told her about them, about the Dementors." She doesn't mean James, she means Snape. And she doesn't say it with admiration. She says it like someone remembering war stories from the other side of the fence. She saw things, she knew Lily had entered a world of darkness and did not retreat. The idea that Lily was too good for the world of magic is fiction. She belonged to it, she thrived in it, and she chose to fight for it. Dumbledore didn't recruit weaklings into his inner circle. He recruited warriors. Lily was one. Even Snape in his dying moments doesn't weep for Lily because she was kind. He mourns her loss because she had meaning. "You have your mother's eyes," he says to Harry, not as a compliment, but as a reminder of her determination, her capacity for choice, her ability to love fiercely and act upon that love without compromise. We should ask ourselves, why does Rowling choose not to show us more of Lily? Perhaps it is because she is meant to remain, to some extent, a mystery. But that doesn't mean we must accept the surface narrative. The clues are there. In her decisions, in her affiliations, in the way others speak about her. Lily Evans was not a saint. She was a soldier, a fighter, a witch of tremendous inner strength who didn't just die for what she loved. She lived for it, battled for it, and stood her ground until the end. Let us remember that the story of Harry Potter doesn't begin with peace, it begins with war. And Lily Evans was on the front lines. Number 24. James never admitted his mistakes. It begins in the sunlight, the shores of a quiet Hogwarts lake, in the innocence of youth and arrogance of power. A boy named Severus Snape is dangling upside down, humiliated in front of dozens of students. His robes flap around his skinny frame, his underpants exposed, his dignity shattered. James Potter, Quidditch star, and Gryffindor's golden boy, is the one holding the wand. Laughter erupts from the crowd. Lily Evans, trying to stop it, is ignored. Sirius Black grins beside his friend, relishing the drama. It is one of the most revealing scenes in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, not because of what happens, but because of what doesn't happen afterward. "Snivelus," James mocks, wand lazily pointed, "all in good fun." Snape spits out blood and hatred. This memory, extracted unwillingly from Snape's mind, is raw. It's not second-hand, not a rumor or retelling. It's what happened. And it raises a haunting question. When did James Potter ever apologize? Because in all the rich tapestry of the books, in every whispered tale of bravery and resistance, nowhere, absolutely nowhere, do we see James face the consequence of that cruelty. Not to Snape, not to anyone. Sirius Black and Remus Lupin, both fiercely loyal to James, insist he changed. He was young, Sirius says to Harry, in Order of the Phoenix. We were all idiots. He grew out of it. Lupin, ever more gentle, nods in agreement. But memory, unlike people, doesn't grow out of anything. It remains. The scene by the lake, which Snape relives like a wound that never scars, isn't balanced by a scene where James shows remorse. He never says, "I was wrong." He never says, "I'm sorry." Perhaps that is the most painful part, not the act itself. Children are cruel, especially the powerful ones. But the silence afterward, the lack of acknowledgement, the fact that when Snape stands bleeding and broken, James merely struts away. And when years pass and wars erupt and people die, James becomes a legend, not a man. The boy with the messy hair and the snitch-fast reflexes becomes the father of the chosen one. And we're told, again and again, that he changed. But change without reflection is not growth, it's merely evolution. The lion learns not to roar, but does it understand why it used to? What's even more unsettling is how quickly those around him dismiss what happened. Sirius speaks of it like a prank, even justifying it by Snape's own nastiness. But that's the same defense bullies use in every hallway across time. He deserved it. Did he? Did the skinny Slytherin with ink-stained fingers and a fascination with the dark art deserve public humiliation, exposure, and shame simply for existing differently? Snape, for all his later sins, and they are many, did not deserve to have his underwear shown to a laughing crowd. He didn't deserve to be stripped of his humanity to feed the egos of 4 boys with wands and a sense of superiority. Lily, who once defended Severus in that memory, is the only one who calls it out for what it is. "Leave him alone," she yells. James pretends not to hear. "I wouldn't go out with you if it were a choice between you and the giant squid," she says coldly. And yet, somehow, James ends up winning her heart. Somehow, we are told, the boy who tormented her closest childhood friend became the man she loved. How did that transformation happen? Where is that scene? It is missing from the canon. We never see James apologizing, not in memory, not in flashback, not in stories passed down, not even in Dumbledore's office, where the pensive shows us so much. All we have are testimonies, Sirius's laughter, Lupin's soft sighs, Dumbledore's silence, all echoing the same idea. How he grew up, he changed. But did he repent? Redemption is not a passive process. It doesn't happen simply because time moves forward. It happens through action, through recognition, through atonement. Snape, deeply flawed and dangerously loyal, spends a lifetime seeking atonement for a single mistake. One sentence that led to Lily's death. He sacrifices everything. He endures hatred, suspicion, and pain. And even then he never forgives himself. James, on the other hand, sacrifices his life, bravely, nobly, to protect his wife and son. It is a heroic end, but it is not a reckoning. He dies as he lived in the final years, loved, admired, unchallenged. Imagine if there had been a scene, one single moment, perhaps in a letter, perhaps in Dumbledore's memory, where James sits across from Snape and says, "I was cruel to you, and I'm sorry." How different that would make everything, how human, how rare. But that scene doesn't exist. Rowling never wrote it. Maybe she meant to, maybe she thought James didn't need it, maybe she thought death redeems the dead. The tragedy is that Snape waited for it. You can see it in the hate he carries, not just because James took Lily, but because James never looked him in the eye as a man and said, "I hurt you." That pain turned into rage, that rage into bitterness, that bitterness into alliance with darkness, and then, full circle, into sacrifice. Snape died not just for Lily's memory, but for the boy she bore with James, the boy who had James' eyes and none of his arrogance. Snape protected Harry with a silent promise, one James never made. "You will not suffer like I did." So what does that say about James Potter? It says that bravery and kindness don't always walk hand in hand, that a man can fight Voldemort and still never apologize to the boy he tormented, that being a good father doesn't erase the failings of youth unless those failings are faced. Even Dumbledore, who knew both boys, never speaks of reconciliation. He praises James, mourns James, elevates James, but never once suggests that James made amends. His silence speaks volumes. The headmaster who champions second chances never gives us James's first. And yet we are asked to admire James. We are asked to see him through the eyes of his friends. "Your father would have done the same," Sirius says when Harry shows courage. But maybe Harry wouldn't have bullied a loner by the lake. Maybe Harry, orphaned and kind, knew something James didn't. Humility. There's a quiet moment in Deathly Hallows when Harry sees Snape's memories. He sees the love, the loss, the unbearable grief. And for the first time, he sees his father through another lens. "My father was a bit of an idiot," he admits. It's the closest the book's ever come to admitting the truth. James Potter was flawed, human, arrogant, capable of cruelty, and perhaps incapable of apology. We see 1,000 layers of Snape. We see him fall, rise, love, hate, protect. We see him weep. But we never see James weep. Never see him regret. Never see him acknowledge that he built part of his legacy on the broken dignity of a boy who never forgot. It's not that James was a villain, he wasn't. But he wasn't a saint either. And in this story, saints are dangerous. Saints are one-dimensional. Saints don't need to learn. What makes Snape so tragic is that he did. And what makes James so tragic is that we never know if he did. Maybe Lily saw something good in James. Maybe he treated her with tenderness and respect. Maybe he changed for her. But changing for love is not the same as changing because you recognize your wrongs. Love can be selfish, too. If you change only because someone is watching, is it truly a change? We want to believe James became better. We want to believe the boy who hexed Snape became the man who died for Harry. But belief without evidence is faith, not fact. And the books, detailed, layered, vast, never give us that proof. So we are left with a question that haunts the shadow of the lake. What if James never looked back? What if the boy who laughed at suffering simply outgrew the need to laugh, but never outgrew the desire to win? What if the lack of apology was not forgetfulness but indifference? What if Snape's tragedy began not with a slur, not with a prophecy, but with the quiet, echoing absence of two words he never heard? "I'm sorry." James Potter remains frozen in time. The boy in the air, with wind-swept hair and smugness in his grin, never lands back on the ground to say what needs to be said. And maybe that's the greatest flaw of all. Not cruelty, but silence. Number 25. Lily might have used Snape. Severus Snape loved Lily Evans. That much is beyond question. From the very first moment we are introduced to this dark, complicated man, a single truth haunts his every word and action. He never stopped loving her. Always, he tells Dumbledore, in a moment that cracked the hearts of millions. Yet hidden within this tragic declaration lies a troubling possibility, one that fans have debated for years, one that refuses to disappear. What if Lily Evans knew of Snape's love all along and used it? Lily wasn't oblivious. She was intelligent, perceptive, and emotionally mature, far beyond her years. When she met Severus as a young girl, she recognized immediately that he was different, lonely, intense, awkward. He introduced her to the wizarding world, and in return, she gave him something he'd never had: warmth. In those early years, they were inseparable. She defended him from her sister's ridicule, from bullies at school, even from the shadow that began to grow over him. But love? No, that she never offered. Still, she must have known. The way Snape looked at her, the way he spoke to her, the desperate way he clung to her friendship, even as they drifted apart. "You're being really rude, you know," she said to James Potter in Order of the Phoenix, while defending Severus. That wasn't just loyalty, it was ownership. She knew she was his protector, his sole bright spot in a world that despised him. And she never once denied him the illusion that she might love him back. Even when Snape began hanging out with future Death Eaters, Avery, Mulciber, and Rosier, even when he called Muggleborn's mudbloods behind her back, she stayed. She reprimanded him, yes, argued with him, yes, but she stayed. It wasn't until he called her a mudblood that she cut him off. "I don't need help from filthy little mudbloods like her," he screamed, and that was the end. Not his affiliations, not the dark magic, not his silence as she was insulted by his friends. Just that one word that wasn't just betrayal, it was rejection. So why did Lily tolerate it all until that point? Why did she endure the creeping darkness in Severus? Why didn't she abandon him earlier when the signs were already unmistakable? Some argue it was kindness, but others, more cynical perhaps, suggest something else entirely. That Lily enjoyed being the center of his universe, that she needed his devotion, that she liked having someone who adored her so completely, so obsessively, that he would do anything for her. And Snape would have. He did. He risked everything, his position, his safety, his soul, for her memory. After her death, he switched sides, not because he believed in the Order, not because he thought Voldemort should be stopped, but because Lily was dead and her son lived. "He has her eyes," Snape whispered to Dumbledore, and it wasn't justice he wanted. It was atonement. It was the closest thing he could get to her again. But if Lily truly saw all this, if she truly understood the depths of his affection, then we must ask, did she ever feel guilty for keeping him close? For letting him believe there might be more? When Lily and Severus fought in their 5th year, her words were deliberate and cutting. "You've chosen your way, I've chosen mine. Not, I don't love you, not, you broke my heart. Just a cold separation of paths, the kind of phrase you use when the emotional rope has frayed beyond repair, but not one that suggests deep, personal heartbreak on her part." And yet Snape's heartbreak was all-consuming. In The Prince's Tale, Rowling paints a portrait of a boy so obsessed, so consumed by his longing for Lily, that he sees no path in life without her. He watches from shadows, protects her child, accepts humiliation, and risks exposure, all for the memory of someone who once smiled at him on a grassy hill in Spinner's End. And perhaps for Lily, that was enough. Perhaps she liked being loved that much. We like to believe Lily Evans was a saint, that she was kind to all, noble to the end, selfless in love and death. But perhaps, like many people, she had flaws. Small, quiet flaws, the kind that whisper, not shout. The kind that don't destroy lives, but gently alter the course of one man's fate. Was it fair for her to keep writing him letters after Hogwarts when she was already with James? Was it fair to confide in him, to visit him during holidays, knowing how he felt? "He's still my friend, James," she once said, according to one early manuscript draft. That line never made it into the books, but the sentiment was there. Even after everything, she still called him friend. But friendship built on unspoken love is never simple, and Snape never recovered. In one of the most haunting scenes of the series, Dumbledore accuses Snape of caring only for Lily, not for Harry. "You do not care, then, about the deaths of her husband and child. They can die, as long as you have what you want?" Snape's answer is silence. He doesn't deny it. Because for him, Lily was the sun, the moon, and every star in between. Without her, nothing mattered. But for Lily, what was Snape? A boy from her childhood? A friend she outgrew? A shadow she finally had to leave behind? Or was he more than that, a comfort she relied on, a constant presence she kept close because it felt good to be needed? The line between affection and manipulation is thin, and while there's no evidence Lily ever acted with cruelty, intention is not the only measure. Sometimes passivity can wound just as sharply as malice. Lily didn't have to lie, she just had to let Snape hope. And hope, when it's unreciprocated, is a dangerous drug. Would Snape have turned to the Death Eaters so willingly had Lily rejected him cleanly, completely, early on? Or did the ambiguity of their relationship make it worse? Was he trying to impress her with power? Was he trying to become someone worthy of her love? And when he failed, did it shatter something so deeply that he could never repair it? It's worth noting that Lily chose James Potter, a boy who once dangled Severus upside down in front of a crowd, a boy who mocked him, humiliated him, and tried to make him disappear. Lily claimed to despise those traits. "You're as bad as he is," she said to James after the infamous bullying incident in Order of the Phoenix. But a year later she was dating him. Did Snape notice that contradiction? Of course he did, and it must have hollowed him out. In his mind, he lost her not to a hero, but to a tormentor. And that pain, compounded by guilt, regret, and longing, fueled every decision he made from that point forward. His spying, his sacrifices, his duplicity, none of it came from principle. It came from Lily. Always. But what if Lily had said it plainly? What if one day she had looked him in the eye and said, "Severus, I do not love you. I never have, and I never will"? Would that have changed anything? Or would it have broken him faster? The tragedy of Snape's life is not just that he loved someone who didn't love him back. It's that he lived in the possibility that she might, that she once did, that somewhere in the tangled past a version of her could have chosen him, and didn't. And Lily, she died young. Too young to explain herself, too young to know the long-term impact of her actions, too young to see what she had left behind in her wake, a man so haunted by her memory that he gave his last breath protecting her son. So, was she cruel? No, but perhaps she was careless. Perhaps she leaned too heavily on a boy's devotion without realizing how deep it ran. Perhaps she wanted to believe she could fix him with kindness. Perhaps she liked being adored, even if she didn't return it. And perhaps she used him. Not maliciously, not coldly, but in that very human way we sometimes hold on to those who make us feel important. Those who worship us. Those who will never leave until we make them. That's the pain in Snape's story. Not just that Lily died, but that he never truly had her, and maybe she never intended him to. Yet still he said, always. And that is the most tragic love story of them all. Number 26. James joined the war for fame. There was always something radiant about James Potter. From the moment he stepped into the halls of Hogwarts, he drew attention, like a magnet. Brilliant on a broomstick, quick-witted in class, and as charming as he was reckless. He was the boy everyone noticed, the one others admired or envied. But beneath the laughter and daring pranks there lived something deeper, something that would one day shape his choices on a battlefield far darker than any Quidditch pitch. A thirst, not just for justice, but for glory. James grew up in a privileged household, and while he wasn't spoiled in the traditional sense, he was certainly used to being admired. There were no siblings to compete with, no hungry eyes at the dinner table. His parents doted on him. He was their miracle, born late in life, and they poured into him all their hopes. From a young age, James learned that he was destined for something special, and perhaps by the time he joined Hogwarts and soared effortlessly into the Gryffindor Quidditch team, he had already begun to believe that greatness wasn't just a possibility, it was a promise. By fifth year, James had made his mark. He wasn't just popular, he was a school legend in the making. He walked the halls with Sirius Black, his best friend and fellow rebel, and together they ruled Hogwarts' social scene like renegade kings. Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. They signed proudly on the Marauders' map, their secret gift to mischief-making students of the future. But behind the nicknames and laughter, something more serious was stirring in the outside world. The name Voldemort had begun to circulate in hushed tones, and the first signs of war flickered in the shadows. Lily Evans, James's future wife, once scolded him in public. "You're arrogant, Potter. You think it's all about you, showing off, hexing people for fun, strutting around with your broomstick like you own the place." Her voice had been sharp, her eyes angry. And yet even then she saw the fire in him, the kind of fire that, if focused, could burn away the vanity and leave only the courage. James, for his part, had smirked, but her words stuck. They always did. When he left school, Voldemort's forces had grown bolder. Attacks on Muggleborns increased, and families disappeared overnight. Dumbledore, already leading a quiet resistance, formed the Order of the Phoenix. He called for brave witches and wizards to rise against the dark tide. James answered. Of course he did. But why? Sirius once joked, "You just want to be in the history books, Prongs." James had laughed. And what's wrong with that? It wasn't a denial. It wasn't even a deflection. It was an admission, half in jest, half in truth. The war was terrifying, yes, but it also offered something no schoolmatch ever could, a stage where life and death mingled, where legends were born. James had always craved greatness, and the war gave him a chance to reach for it. He wasn't alone in that. Gilderoy Lockhart, another Hogwarts student, would later fake acts of valor to gain fame. But James wasn't faking anything. He really did stand his ground. He really did defy Voldemort 3 times. But we must ask, what motivated him? Was it just love for peace and justice, or was there also a craving to be remembered, to be revered? Remus Lupin, the quiet observer of the Marauders, once said, James was brave, but sometimes he was brave in a way that needed an audience. That sentence haunted many who heard it. It wasn't a criticism, it was a memory heavy with affection and regret. James had always performed best when eyes were watching. Was it really a coincidence that he charged into danger with such flair? There is a story few remember of a raid in the Yorkshire moors. Death Eaters had targeted a group of Muggle-born families, and the order was dispatched. James, Sirius, and Marlene McKinnon were among them. The battle was fierce. Spells cracked through the air like lightning, and the stench of burning grass mixed with fear. Amid the chaos, James leapt onto a crumbling rooftop to draw the enemy's fire away from a wounded child. He succeeded, but not before casting Lumos Maxima into the sky, illuminating himself like a beacon. It was reckless. It was foolish. It was undeniably heroic. He always wanted to be the brightest star, Marlene later told Lily, even if it meant burning faster. Lily, of course, was the one who saw all sides of him. She knew he had changed, had softened, had matured. But she also knew that part of him still lived for the thrill. He wasn't driven by cruelty or ambition like Voldemort, but neither was his heart as selfless as someone like Dobby the house elf or Neville Longbottom. James wanted to do good, yes, but he also wanted to shine while doing it. This is not to diminish his sacrifice, it is to humanize it. James gave his life protecting his family, refusing to stand aside when Voldemort came. He had no wand in hand, no spell ready. He died trying to buy Lily and Harry even 1 extra second. That is the kind of bravery no ego can fake. And yet, even in that final moment, some say he held his head high, not in arrogance, but in defiance, as if to say, let them remember me standing. Albus Dumbledore once said, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." James made the right choices, but it is worth asking whether he made them only because they were right, or because they also made him look right. The line between virtue and vanity is thin, especially in war. Even in the way James treated Snape, we see this duality. Their enmity wasn't just about Lily, it was also about pride, about competition, about proving dominance. James saved Snape's life once, but only after he had helped create the danger. He didn't want Snape to die, but he also didn't want to be remembered as the boy who let a schoolmate perish. Sirius had goaded him into the prank, but James's decision to stop it came from something deeper than friendship, perhaps even deeper than guilt. Perhaps it came from a desire to be a hero, not just in Lily's eyes, but in his own. In the books, Harry often hears whispers of his father's greatness. "He was a great Quidditch player," said Madame Hooch. "Head boy, talented, popular," said McGonagall. But the most telling comment comes from Snape in his bitter sneer, "Strutting about the castle." That word, strutting, captures something essential. Snape may have been cruel, but he was perceptive. James didn't walk through life, he performed it. But can we blame him? In a world teetering on the brink of darkness, perhaps some brightness, any brightness, was necessary. People wanted heroes. They needed to believe that someone like James could face death with a smile. They wanted his confidence, his certainty, his laughter in the face of fear. He made the war look winnable. And maybe, for a while, that illusion helped them survive. Peter Pettigrew, the weakest of the Marauders, idolized James. He was their leader, he once told Voldemort. They all looked up to him. And they did. Even Sirius, rebellious and proud, followed James without question. That charisma, so natural, so effortless, was both a gift and a trap. It made James believe he was invincible. And in the end, that belief killed him. He and Lily could have gone into deeper hiding. Dumbledore had urged them to trust someone with the Fidelius charm. James chose Sirius. Sirius, wanting to outsmart Voldemort, suggested Peter instead. That mistake, made out of cleverness, not carelessness, cost them their lives. But had James not believed so fully in his own circle, in his own story, might he have been more cautious? We remember James as a martyr, and rightly so, but we should also remember the boy who grinned at danger, who tilted his head when praised, who needed to win, not just for the cause, but for the crowd. He was not perfect, but he was brave. He was not selfless, but he was willing to die. And in the end, perhaps that's what makes him so human. His heroism wasn't pure, but it was real. He stepped into the fire not as a saint, but as a man, flawed, proud, bold, a man who wanted to be remembered not just as a father or husband, but as a legend, and he was. Number 27, their sacrifice wasn't that unique. The story begins, as we all know, with a child in a crib and a curse that failed to kill. But long before Harry Potter became the boy who lived, long before he was celebrated as the symbol of hope and resistance, there were many others who stood against the darkness and fell. Thousands, in fact. Witches and wizards who died without leaving behind a legend, without a gravestone bearing a lightning bolt, without a son who would carry their legacy in every whispered retelling. And yet we rarely speak of them. Why? James and Lily Potter are remembered as heroes, the beautiful young couple who defied Lord Voldemort 3 times, who gave their lives to protect their child. Their sacrifice is enshrined as noble, unique, transcendent. But what if it wasn't? What if, instead, their story was simply one thread in a vast tapestry of loss? One among thousands? What if, stripped of emotion and myth, their deaths were just another heartbreak in a war full of tragedies? Take the case of Marlene McKinnon. Her name appears briefly in Order of the Phoenix when Alastor Moody shows Harry the old photograph of the original Order of the Phoenix. That's Marlene McKinnon, Moody says. She was killed 2 weeks after this was taken. Voldemort wiped out her whole family. That's it. No funeral scenes, no pensive memories, no elaborate retellings. She, like James and Lily, stood against the darkness. But there was no myth made from her ashes. Her sacrifice has been lost in the folds of time, remembered only by the few who survived. Or consider Gideon and Fabian Prewett, Molly Weasley's brothers. They fought like heroes, Moody mutters, showing Harry the same photograph. They were killed by 5 Death Eaters. They went down fighting. 5 against 2? They didn't run, they didn't beg. They held the line until the end. Isn't that a story worth telling? And yet where is their monument, their myth, their song? Perhaps the reason we don't remember them lies in what followed. James and Lily left a son who lived, not just lived, but defeated the Dark Lord himself. That survival transformed a private tragedy into a national legend. But survival alone doesn't sanctify a death. It doesn't make it more honorable. It simply makes it more visible. Harry became the lens through which the public viewed the sacrifice of his parents. Through him, their deaths became illuminated, magnified. But the deaths of others, those without surviving children or public icons to keep their memory alive, were left in the shadows. We must ask ourselves, did the Potters really die a more significant death than the McKinnons, the Prewetts, the Bones, the Longbottoms who went mad instead of dying? Or was it simply that their story was easier to tell? A perfect narrative arc, love, death, survival, prophecy. It was poetic, it was clean. It gave the war a beginning and eventually an ending. But reality was never so simple. The myth of the one great sacrifice is a lie of omission. It ignores the countless families that were shattered, the Diggle family whose only son was never found, the Wilkes and Rosier cases where entire bloodlines were erased, the mysterious fate of Caradoc Dearborn, who vanished 6 months after this was taken, Moody said, never found his body. He disappeared into the mist of war, his name known only to a few dusty files in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. James and Lily Potter were brave, no one questions that. But so was Emmeline Vance, who was killed in 1996, targeted for her work with the Second Order of the Phoenix. The Daily Prophet dismissed her death with one sentence. Dumbledore mourned her quietly, no statue was raised, no ballad written, and so her memory faded. The truth is hard to face. War chooses its martyrs, and history often chooses the convenient dead, the beautiful, the symbolic, the ones whose stories can be woven into fairy tales and bedtime legends. Lily was the mother who loved too fiercely to let death take her child. James was the young father who stood wandless against the greatest dark wizard of all time. It makes a good story, but what of Benji Fenwick? Blown to pieces, Moody said, his voice hollow. Only bits of him left. It's not the kind of ending you tell to children. There's something dangerous in the way we elevate one sacrifice above others. It allows us to look away from the scale of the devastation. It allows us to forget the unnamed heroes. The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters, Sirius once said. But perhaps history is. Heroes and footnotes. Names we remember and names we let go. Even within the Order itself, the memory is selective. Harry never visits the graves of the Prewetts. He never asks about Benji or Caradoc. He barely remembers Emmeline, but Lily's love is carved into his very soul, a protective charm that sets him apart. As Dumbledore says, your mother died to save you. If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. But again, Lily was not the only mother who loved, not the only one who died to protect. She was simply the one whose child survived. The myth of the Potters has been romanticized. They are frozen in time, 21, beautiful, brave, tragic. But real heroism often happens without witnesses, without spells that leave visible marks, without scars that become lightning bolts. There were those who died in dungeons, in ambushes, in their own homes. There were those who were tortured before the end. There were those who were never even named. Is it possible to remember James and Lily truthfully without diminishing the others? Yes, if we place their deaths in context, if we stop pretending they were singular. Their courage was real, but not rare. Their love was pure, but not unique. Their fate was heartbreaking, but not more so than the countless others whose names are buried in aura files and family Bibles. There's a kind of quiet violence in the way we forget. In Deathly Hallows, when Harry visits Godric's Hollow, he sees the grave of his parents. "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death," it reads. A beautiful line, but elsewhere other enemies lie unburied. No tombstones, no flowers, no lines from Scripture, only silence. And perhaps that is the cruelest part, not just dying, but being forgotten. As if the world moved on and your story didn't matter, as if your life was just one more statistic in a war that demanded too many. There is a line in The Half-Blood Prince when Dumbledore speaks of memory. It is the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness, nothing more. But what of those who became unknown themselves? Imagine a young witch named Elspeth Green. She lived in Ottery, St. Catchpole, just a few houses down from the Weasleys. She wasn't a member of the Order. She wasn't in the ministry. She was just a healer who treated injured Muggleborns in secret. One night, she was dragged from her home. No trial, no escape. Her name was never in the papers, but she died with her wand in hand. Who mourns her? Or a squib named Albert Grubb, who ran messages for the Order using a network of enchanted owls. He was captured by snatchers and killed without a name. His death didn't make headlines, but without him, key communications would have failed. His quiet bravery never reached the pages of the Prophet. James and Lily were legends because Harry needed a legend. The world needed a symbol, but behind every symbol there are shadows. The ones who didn't make it into the books, the ones whose stories weren't wrapped in prophecy or magic or destiny, the ones who just tried to help. In the end, this isn't a call to diminish the Potters. It's a call to expand the circle of remembrance, to say their names, Fabian, Gideon, Marlene, Emmeline, Benji, Elspeth, Albert, and to know that the war was not won by one boy's survival alone. It was won, if such a word even applies, by many sacrifices, most of them unseen. And so when we speak of the Potters, let us speak with clarity. Let us honour them not as exceptions, but as part of a greater whole. Let us understand that their story is beautiful, but not the only one worth telling. Let us see, finally, that the myth of one great sacrifice is a lie of comfort. The truth is far more tragic and far more human.